Hi everyone, Katie here. Today I have just a quick tutorial on a couple of different things. First of all, we're going to talk about a technique for bridging some big color gaps. So if you don't have a lot of markers, this is a good way to blend some of the colors that may be pretty far apart and hard to do so. And to do that, I'm going to be using Fairy Magic here from Some Odd Girl, and I'm going to be doing her dress. So as part of this, I'm going to do a little explanation on how I do the folds in this particular image as well. So first of all, I'm just going to show you kind of what I'm working with today. So I'm going to be using three different colors, BG78, which is kind of a dark foresty kind of green color, and then BG49, which is this really bright, fun teal color. And then for my lightest color, I'm going to be using BG11, which, as you can tell, is pretty light, especially compared to my mid-tone of BG49. So what happens when you're trying to blend these two colors is it doesn't work very well. That BG11 is just going to be pushing around some of the color. It doesn't blend it very well. It makes it kind of splotchy, and you still get a really big line here. So no matter how much you do, it's going to look kind of funny. But there's a pretty neat trick for how to kind of extend these colors and blend a little bit easier. A lot of time it's called tip-to-tip technique, and it's actually taking the tip of your lightest marker and touching it to the tip of your darker marker. But a while ago somebody told me a pretty cool tip is to actually pull your ink from the barrel of your marker or from the inside of your cap, wherever you get that excess ink. That's going to allow you to know exactly how much color you're pulling up on your light marker instead of just guessing when you're pulling it from the tip of the darker marker. So just as an example, I'm going to pull off some of this BG49 onto the tip of my BG11. I don't know if you can see that. And then I'm going to pull that in. And what that does is it gives me kind of a medium color that's going to bridge the gap between the darker and the lighter. And as you color, the ink from the darker marker comes off, and you just have your lighter color that shows up. So that's the technique that I'm going to use when I do her dress. So I'm just going to set this scrap piece of paper aside. I always keep it nearby so that if I am going back and I'm not sure if I have all of the dark color off of my lighter color and I need to make sure, then I'll scribble it on that little scratch piece of paper just to make sure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my lightest color, and I'm going to lay down where I'm going to want my shadows in her dress. Now my light source is coming from this direction, so it's going to be on this side of her body. So I'm just going to go in here . Get that laid in. There's no real trick to it or anything. Nothing special. I'm just giving myself a guideline for when I come back in with my darker color where I want to put it. Now when I'm not really sure on kind of a dress or clothes for how I think the folds are going to lay, sometimes I'll go onto like Google or the internet and just look up some different images of dresses or whatever so that I have an idea of how the fabric actually lays in real life, and that gives me a better roadmap for when I'm doing it on my image. So here, because her body is kind of rounded in, this dress is actually going to be creating kind of a ripple effect. So right in here is going to be my darkest shadow that's being created from this fold right here. as it comes over it, it's creating a shadow here. And as this one gets higher, and my highlights here at the very end, it's creating a shadow right here on her dress. So that's kind of the idea I have in my head when I get started. I hope I'm explaining that well. I know what I'm thinking, but sometimes not the best in getting it out in words. This I kind of see as all one big swoop here. So we've got this line that kind of connects with this line and comes down all the way here to the bottom. And then right in here, that's also going to be a shadow, because that's going to be where her dress is kind of pooling on the ground. So right where it meets the ground is where it's going to be the darkest, and the rest of this material is going to be kind of bunched up and laying on the surface of the ground, and so it's going to be showing a little bit lighter. And then everything in here from her arm is going to be casting some shadow in there. And then this little notch right here in the line makes me think that there's a little fold there in the fabric. And then in that fold there, of course, it's going to be the darkest. Now, since it's been just a little bit since I went over that piece, I'm going to go over it. Just make sure that my paper is good and saturated. Alright. Now I'm going to take this BG49, and I'm just basically going to go in everywhere that I just laid down kind of my roadmap with my BG11. So what's kind of nice about doing that is I don't have to be too nervous now. I laid down a lot of that, and I'm pretty confident. And if I hadn't liked how it looked, then I could have easily gone in and kind of adjusted the lighter color, whereas not so easy to do with this darker color. So I'm just going to come in here, all those places where I saw there being kind of that shadow, and lay in this darker color. Now, this is where, to get a good blend, since I know that B11 is not going to work too well all on its own, I'm going to take the tip of my B11 marker and I'm going to pull up some of this B49 ink from the barrel. And I'm going to go over the top slightly of that ink that I laid down, that BG49. And whenever I feel like it's kind of coming off of my marker, I'll go back and get some more. And go in and blend that again. Another benefit of doing this is that now you're laying down a few colors, and so your paper is getting saturated, which is going to make it easier to blend anyway. So this keeps me from getting that really kind of messy, muddy, blotchy look that you can get if you take too light of a color over a darker color. In any place where you think maybe you let some of that B11 come through more than you wanted, just pick up a little bit more color and go back in there. Now you can see I left some white there. And so I'm going to kind of come in and put a little bit of the BG11. Not all the way, but just now going ahead and defining that lighter color a little bit in there. And then anywhere where you see maybe you've got a line starting to happen again, just pull up a little bit more of that color and go back in there and blend some of that out. Then you start to get just into personal preference for how dark or light you want to make the color of her dress. How much further you want to take your shading. So I'm actually going to take now my BG78, which is my very darkest color. I'm going to come in, put some of that in where those deepest shadows would be. So again, in there with her dress. And where her arm is. You can use as little or as much of that as you want. The more of a difference that you put between your darkest shadows and your very lightest highlights is going to give you a higher contrast of coloring. So when you hear that term high contrast, that's kind of what it's referring to, is that you have really bright highlights and then you have some really dark shadows. So if that's a look that you like, don't be scared to go in there with some of the really darker colors and put those in, because it's going to make a big difference. Now I'm going to take my BG11 because I don't actually want to do too much with this BG78. I want to kind of leave it where it is, and so what it's going to do is just soften that line a little bit that I had going on from that color without like pushing it around too much. I want it to be there and I want it pretty defined, but I just don't want it to be a really stark line. And I don't want to change the actual color of my dress to be too much darker, so I don't really want to take that mid-tone and go in, because if I do that, then I run the risk that our whole dress is going to turn really dark, and I don't really want that. So I'm just scribbling off any of that excess BG78 that I might have picked up on my B11, because now I am going to come in and I'm actually going to bridge those highlights so that they're not white. But I kind of save that till very, very last, because I don't want to go over them too many times. And then you can kind of see where this kind of rounded swooping motion has, yes, that's a technical term in case you're wondering, swooping motion here has kind of created that look of her rounded body in those folds in her dress. So you can give one more look and kind of see if there's any area that you wanted to darken up, You could take your colorless blender if you wanted to pull out even more highlight in some of those folds, but I'm pretty happy with how things are looking, so I think I'm just going to leave it as is. But so that's just a really quick tutorial that kind of shows you how you can use that technique. So if you don't have a ton of markers, that's okay. You can still get some pretty dynamic coloring in there. Don't be scared to mix it up a little bit. And also just a little bit of folds on clothing and kind of how I do that. So I hope that this was helpful, and thanks so much for watching.